Hello, everybody, and welcome to what is, at least here in Ohio, an exceptionally cloudy, dark, and rainy day. It's a good day for sleeping, but we must cover Isaiah 17 before we take our nap. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about we're going to go north a little bit out of Moab, and we're going to go to Syria, and the capital of Syria, which is Damascus. So we have a little bit more specificity here with our timeline. The prophecies in this chapter appear to have been delivered prior to 732 BC, so these are earlier. That was the year that Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, conquered Damascus. You can read about that in 2 Kings. And we know that the Assyrians conquered Israel in 721 BC, and that's going to be referenced in this chapter, so we know it wasn't after that. Now, taking account of our historical characters that are key to this chapter, we have Isaiah, the prophet of God. We have the Assyrian Empire. God used Assyria to punish Syria. Notice the distinction between Assyria and Syria. That can be a little tricky. So God used Assyria to punish Syria and Israel. But the Assyrians were not innocent themselves, and they were also going to receive God's judgment when they attempted to conquer Jerusalem. Then we have the Syrians. Their capital, as I mentioned, was Damascus. God delivers an oracle against them in this chapter, foretelling of their downfall. And 3 words to clarify today. You've already probably heard oracle if you've been doing our Isaiah study, a divine announcement, a message from God. We've also talked about Ephraim. Ephraim was a tribe of Israel, but in Isaiah's time, the name was used to refer to the whole northern kingdom of Israel, all the tribes that made up that kingdom. And then we have Asherim. This is one we haven't seen before. It's in verse 8. These were basically worship sites that were dedicated to this pagan goddess Asherah. And she seems to take a number of forms throughout different cultures in the ancient world. You read about her in places like the Judges. In the previous Israelite history, they had a problem with worshiping this god instead of the true God of heaven. It's thought that she was associated somehow, some way with fertility. I know that Isaiah hasn't been really the most positive book up to this point, other than those glimmers of the Emmanuel figure that we've talked about. It's been a lot about God judging the nations, and we're going to see something similar here with the nation of Syria. So verses 1 through 11, an oracle against Israel and Damascus. Damascus in Syria was an ancient and a powerful city, but God said, and Isaiah prophesied, that God would destroy it by sending the Assyrians against it. So once again, the Assyrians are going to be the tool in God's hand. God promised to make Damascus into a heap of ruins and to send its citizens into captivity. Now keep in mind, Syria and the northern kingdom of Israel, also referred to as Ephraim, they were allies, and they thought that by teaming up they could, fend off threats, but that wasn't going to happen. God was going to prevent them from making any progress and defending themselves. They would suffer the same fate as one another, defeat and capture. When the inhabitants of Syria and Israel were taken out of their lands, Isaiah said that the territory would be like a healthy man, a once healthy man that had become emaciated, once full, but soon to be starved of people. And he employs 2 other word pictures in this chapter to describe the barrenness of the country after their defeat. First, the people of Israel would be harvested and removed like wheat is harvested and removed from a field. And second, Israel's land would be like a tree after picking, when only a few straggling pieces of fruit remain on the branches. There's no doubt that, at least in Israel's case, this refers to 721 BC, when the Assyrians conquered Israel and took their people into captivity and left only a remnant behind. And as we pointed out in our timeline section, that happened a little bit earlier for Syria, which you can read about in 2 Kings. So in that day of the conquest, the defeat, the destruction, God leveling these cities to the ground, especially Israel, when they really needed help, unsurprisingly, Israel would finally turn away from all their idols and their false altars and these Asherim that they worshipped, and they would seek help from the God of heaven, described as the Holy One of Israel. Now we've got 3 more verses left in the chapter, verses 12 through 14, mighty Assyria shattered by God. So this is the tables kind of turning. Assyria has been used by God, but as we've already talked about, Assyria is also going to be punished by God. We're going to talk about that a little bit as we finish up today. God would allow the Syrians to conquer Syria and Israel, but he prophesied that he would break them before they were able to conquer Judah and Jerusalem. They were like a roaring wave, pouring into Syria and Israel and overwhelming everything. But God broke the wave on the walls of Jerusalem, or he would do this, and he would scatter the Assyrian people, the Assyrian army. And this prophecy was fulfilled in some history that we've already read about back in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 32 through 37, when God's angel killed 185,000 men of the Assyrian army in one night as they were preparing to take Jerusalem, and then the Assyrian army had to retreat. So as I mentioned before we started Isaiah, it might be great to go back and read books like 2 Kings to get the history behind a lot of these prophecies and to understand a little bit more about their fulfillments and what leads up to them. Okay, so let's go down to our application today. You notice really throughout the book of Isaiah, taking a look at the big picture, God was willing to call out the sins of other nations, but he dealt first with the sins of his own people. Only after condemning Judah and Israel did God turn his attention to Assyria, Babylon, Moab, and Damascus. Israel, Judah, they didn't get a pass just because they were God's special people. He was going to make sure that they were they were corrected first and foremost. And I think there's a lesson here for us. We need to condemn sin in the same way. We need to be able to condemn sin everywhere we see it, even amongst our own people, our families even. Unfortunately, many are good at pointing out unrighteousness in others, but when it comes to their own families, they cover up immorality, or they look the other way when they know that someone that they love is in sin, or they make excuses for them, they downplay what they're doing. God's justice is never partial in the Bible. His calls for repentance have never been partial. Our judgment should never be partial, especially to those we love the most. Because really, I know that it's hard to do that, but really we have to remember that we aren't doing anyone any favors by letting them live in sin or, turning the other direction so we don't see what they're doing, so we don't have to confront them about, the wrongs in their lives. We need to judge impartially. And we especially need to call our own families and our own people to account to live up to God's standards and his laws. Okay, that is the study in Isaiah chapter 17 for today. Now you may go take a nap.